Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about the topic of tarot and prediction and timing. And I want to talk about this from my approach and how I do that. And I wanted to talk about this because I know there are some people who don't use prediction at all with their tarot readings, and they might use tarot from a completely psychological view or approach. But for people who are interested to know a bit more about prediction and timing, I thought I would talk a bit about that. And I'm going to show some cards from the Waite deck to talk about timing in general. And I'm also going to probably make some comments about a tarot reading that I have experienced in the past and what happened with timing in that situation too. So, talking about timing in general, there are different ways of doing that, but the main way that I look at the timing is to do with the season or time of the year. So, for example, with the Ace of Wands, the Ace of Wands to me is the spring equinox. And with the timing of spring and the spring equinox in particular, that is according to where you live. So I'm in the southern hemisphere, so that would mean spring for me in the southern hemisphere. But of course, if you're in the northern hemisphere, that is the time of the spring equinox and spring season for you. So I see the Ace of Wands as spring and the spring equinox season. Next one is Cups, and I see this as the summer solstice. So this represents the summer season, and particularly the summer solstice. And this is mainly according to the Golden Dawn associations. Ace of Swords for the autumn equinox. And I probably should mention here too that the autumn equinox in the northern hemisphere is associated with the sign of Libra, the scales. So this is the autumn equinox. And then we have the winter solstice with Pentacles, Ace of Pentacles. And the winter solstice is associated with the sign of Capricorn. So I'm also going to just mention here as well, what I should have mentioned before is the spring equinox is a sign of Aries in the northern hemisphere. And I mean from that time. That's the beginning of the spring season. And the Cups is the summer solstice, which is the sign of Cancer, the crab in the northern hemisphere. Now just going back again with the Ace of Swords representing the spring equinox, the sign of Aries, and the whole of the spring season. How you would do the timing with each of the suits is you would say that all of the Wands cards from 1 to 10 would represent that whole period of spring, and as each of those weeks go by, there's 10 cards and there are 13 weeks to a season. And I'm talking about here just the general 4 seasons. So what you can do is think of the 5 of Wands, for example, as being halfway through the spring season, and the 10 of Wands being towards the end of the season. So if you wanted to use the cross-quarter seasons, as in the Pagan Wheel of the Year, you would be better with a Pagan Tarot deck that covers those seasons. And I know that the Pagan Ways Tarot by Anna Franklin, for example, that does have cards for the Wheel of the Year, for the cross-quarter seasons, and it uses the court cards for those seasons. For example, if you wanted to use the Pagan year for your readings. But if you just want to use the general 4 seasons, you can use any other tarot deck for that, whether it is a Waite-Smith system of deck, or whether it is a Toth style deck with plain pips, or a Marseille. You could definitely use the 4 seasons, the 4 general seasons as timing. So that was the main thing I wanted to say about using the seasons as a way of timing. And another way to look at this as well is to look at the elements of the cards. For example, Wands are the fire element. So as far as timing is concerned, if you get any of the Wands cards from 1 to 10, because it's fire, the element of fire, that would move in a faster period, which could be a matter of days, because fire is the fastest element. And then if you look at the water element with cups, any of the cups cards from 1 to 10, the element of water is a bit more dense. So that would take weeks rather than days. This is a general guide of how I approach timing. So any of the cups cards from 1 to 10 would be weeks rather than the days of the Wands. And swords are one of these things that could be weeks. This is to do with the air element. This can be weeks as well, but it's probably a slightly longer period of weeks than the water element. So this would probably be a longer number of weeks. I'm talking generally here. I'm not saying that this is pinpoint accurate, but this is generally. So this is the air element here, and this is more like weeks. And I think this is more like weeks because swords are about thinking, and this is more to do with decision making. And decision making can take weeks because, and I mean a longer period of weeks, because you are thinking a lot more about something. By weeks, it could turn into 2 or 3 months. But weeks to months, because a decision and thinking and mulling over normally occurs. The Ace of Wands itself is a bit different. That might mean a decision that is made after many weeks of thinking. And then Pentacles, which is earth element, and that is the most dense element. So this is months, could even be a period of a year or more, because with Pentacles being the earth element and being the most dense element, This is an energy that is resistant to change, and it is going to be more entrenched and more reluctant about change and wanting everything to stay the same. So this one is more about a longer period of months, or maybe even going into a year or two. So that's my general guide about timing with the seasons and with the elements. And the other thing I want to talk about here too is this card, the Wheel of Fortune. This can be a tricky card for timing because it can be interpreted in different ways. And I'll give you an example of a reading that I received in this regard in a moment. The Wheel of Fortune is associated with the sign of Jupiter in the Golden Dawn associations. And the planet Jupiter normally has a 12-month cycle, which is a year. So you could think of this card in that way, and you could think of this, oh, okay, well, change is on the way, could take up to 12 months. So you could use that Jupiter 12-month cycle guide for this card. But what I have found with this card is why it can be tricky is because you don't know what the position of the wheel is in. You don't know whether it is a full turn of the wheel, a half turn of the wheel, a quarter turn of the wheel. You don't know what part of the cycle or the turn of the wheel that this card is at. So this means cycles in general too. It's not just necessarily the Jupiter cycle of 12 months. It can mean a much longer cycle. So, what happened to me over the years? I had a reading many years ago, and this card turned up. And I was seeing a really good reader. She was actually psychic as well, and she was accurate. And of course, she was honest with me, and she saw this card and she said, well, actually, I can't really tell you when this will be. So she was being honest about that then. And she was describing a new partner or another partner that I was going to meet. And as it turned out, this was a period of years before I met that partner. It was actually 8 years later. 8 years. And then what happened in between that time, I got another reading from another psychic reader who was actually very good and accurate as well. But it was towards the end of that 8-year period. And she was actually not able to pinpoint it either, but it was actually a lot closer to the time, and she was able to say to me, well, I actually don't think this will be much longer. I think this is going to be something like 6 to 12 months. And that is what happened. But I just wanted to use this as an example of just how long a cycle can be. It may not be 12 months. It could be 2 years, could be 7 years. It really represents planetary cycles, and planetary cycles can vary a lot. You know, a Saturn cycle can be 2.5 years, or there's other much longer periods. The cycle of Uranus is a 7-year cycle. So I just wanted to mention what can happen with this card. It can be tricky. It really is about divine timing, which means it won't happen till it is meant to happen, and it can be a bit difficult trying to say exactly when. So I wanted to mention what can happen with this card as far as timing is concerned. Okay, so there's a few of my thoughts about tarot prediction and timing. So I hope that is useful to people out there who want to know a bit more about that. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.